Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar on Give Your Payment Processing a Workflow, a Health Check, hosted by BAASS Business Solutions in partnership with North 49. So before we dive in, just want to cover a few housekeeping rules before it all begins. So if you have any questions, please type it into the question box. We'll answer that question at the appropriate time. We want to make sure that we don't miss anything. Also, it's always good practice to ensure your headphones are plugged in with the volume turned up. If you are having any technical issues, please write it in our chat box so that we'll do our best to assist you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Peter Grzyk, the Strategic Partner Manager for North 49 Global Payments. Peter, welcome to the BAASS Business Solutions webinar. Can you cover
Thanks,
the
Sarah.
agenda with that?
I can, sure. So today we're going to talk about mostly about compliance and security, primarily around processing of customer credit card data, something that maybe you are aware of or perhaps not. There's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding about how we're supposed to handle that. So we're going to dive into all of that. We're going to talk about ways that you can sort of mitigate some of your risk around handling customers' credit card data. And as well, we're going to talk a little bit about at the end about a solution that might help you mitigate those risks and address that among other things.
Amazing. So let's get started with talking about risk. So Peter, what are some of the common data keeping practices that are actually pretty high risk for businesses, but people may not realize it?
Yeah, and we probably all experienced this ourselves in our lives, and perhaps you're actually doing some of these in your businesses. So, if you've ever contacted a company or somebody you're transacting with, and you want to pay by credit card, so then they proceed to either send you some kind of a paper form that you're supposed to fill out and either email back or fax it back to them, or perhaps you read your credit card details over the phone to them, and they're going to jot it down on a piece of paper. And again, maybe you're doing this as well inside of your businesses. Any of that stuff is not a PCI compliant way to handle credit card information, and it does put your organization at fairly significant risk should those cards ever be compromised. You never know what's going to happen with that information if it's being sent in a non-encrypted manner, if that piece of paper that you've written things down falls into the wrong hands. All of these are very risky situations and do not fall within the standard of what the card brands expect you to do as a merchant handling customers' card data. So that's some of the most common things that we see happening that people maybe aren't even aware of, that they're doing something that's against the compliant rules.
So just for the few of us who may not know what PCI means, could you give us the full name and also to what it
Sure.
means to be compliant?
Yeah, so PCI is actually only part of the abbreviation. It's actually PCI DSS, and that stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. And it's basically a set of requirements designed to protect cardholder data. So what it essentially does, it does a whole bunch of stuff. It kind of lays down the standards globally for how you're supposed to handle card data. So it does ensure the security of that credit card data. It also provides or promotes a consistent data security practice globally. And it does provide a baseline for the technical and operational requirements around handling that information. So it covers things like access control, meaning restricting access to that cardholder data to only those people or processes that really need it. It's all around network security, making sure that you're building and maintaining secure networks and systems. It's about data transmission, meaning anything containing card data needs to be encrypted through those transmissions. It's about managing vulnerability within your systems. So that might involve antivirus software, keeping that up to date and doing regular scans for vulnerability in your systems. And then maintaining a information security policy that's operational policies and procedures in your organization around handling this sensitive information. One of the biggest misconceptions about PCI compliance is that it's all about technology, and it's not. It's also about process. So people in that process are extremely important to make sure that that happens. And I'll give you an example. Locally here, we've enrolled one of our sons into a high school gymnastics program that's administered by the local gymnastics club. And so I wanted to pay by credit card, so got in touch with them and asked them that I could do that. And they proceeded to, again, email me this form that I was supposed to fill out. So, of course, being in the industry, I wasn't about to do that. And I wasn't going to write it down on a piece of paper and even walk it over to them. So when I was in their office, I basically had a chat with them and said, this really isn't a PCI compliant way to do things. Do you have a portal that I can log in to do this? Oh, yeah, we have a portal. We have this secure portal. So there's an example of an individual who had a system in place but was circumventing the system by sending out this paper form. So you see how people are a key element of that PCI compliance process that you put in place. So I think it's about education and regular training of your staff, as well as having the technology solution in place as well. Um, it gets verified, your PCI compliance gets verified by assessments and audits that get done to see that you're meeting the PCI standards, by doing vulnerability scannings, like we mentioned, and other assessments. So, and any merchant that stores, processes, or transmits cardhold data is bound by these PCI compliance rules.
Yeah, I would imagine that it was kind of surprising to know that there was a portal and that wasn't their first choice that they gave you.
It
So
was a
what
bit.
is
So, yeah.
yeah, what is level two and level three data processing, and why does that often qualify businesses for lower processing rates?
Yeah, so that's something that the business to business transactions or business to government transactions can qualify for. And it really just speaks about more information being passed in that credit card transaction, to through the processor. And by passing more data, the card brands deem this as a more secure transaction, meaning less likely that it's going to be a fraudulent transaction. So as a result of that, they will give the merchant who's doing that transaction a better rate because they see less risk in that transaction, right? So level two, that's going to include things like the amount of tax, the customer code, and an invoice number. Level three goes a bit further where it actually provides line item details, so a product description, quantities, units of measure, all that kind of stuff, right? So this level of detail in that transmission of that transaction, again, gives the card brands much more confidence that that is in fact a secure, legitimate transaction, so they're going to give you a better rate. Again, not every business qualifies for this, so you kind of have to talk to your processor and make sure that you're a business that qualifies, and they'll get you through the process that allows you to do that. And it's also about the systems that you're using. They have to be passing that data, so not all of these processors are even equipped to pass that level of data over. So it's something you just need to be cognizant of. Have a conversation with your processor to make sure that they can actually pass that information with the transaction to qualify you for those better rates.
Sounds like that it pays to play safe. So in terms
Yes.
of other risks, are there any other risk with data integrity and how they can be mitigated?
Yeah, there is. And again, it boils down to the human error element, I think, in most cases. I mean, anytime we as humans have to interact with a process, there's a chance that we're going to make a mistake, right? Transcription of a digit or entered into the wrong account number, something happens, right? We deal with this stuff every day. So that's probably the other biggest risk factor in there. So to mitigate that, I guess my advice is whenever you can, whenever it's practical, integrate things and automate things. So if you can take the human element out of the equation and let the computers do what they're very good at doing, right, you're going to alleviate a lot of that risk. With an integrated system that's automated, I think a lot of that risk goes away and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, and by removing the mundane tasks, it kind of
Well, yeah,
opens up the brain space to actually focus on more things of higher value to you, right?
another spin-off benefit for sure.
Exactly. So what would be cost of breach? So are there any potential costs for non-compliance or data breaches?
Yeah, there are, and they can be significant, in fact. And they come in a whole bunch of different categories, I guess. So first of all, the payment processor can levy fines, I guess, if you want to call it that, or fees ranging anywhere from $10 to $100 for every month that you're not compliant. The acquiring banks and the card brands can also levy fines up to, you know, to the high end of things, about 100 grand a month
Like,
until you become compliant. So it can be significant. Now that's only the immediate fines. Now there's all other kind of costs associated if there is a data breach. if you think about it, if your systems were compromised and a whole bunch of customers' information was compromised, so what's it going to cost to fix that? And it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, you're going to have to do a forensic investigation to figure out who's been compromised and what's been compromised. There's going to be legal fees. There's going to be reimbursement for all the fraudulent charges. Um, the card brands are probably going to look to recover some of their costs because they're going to levy a fine because of the breach. They're going to have to issue refunds or reimbursements to the issuing banks to replace all those credit cards that have been breached, right? They're not going to pay for that. The offending merchant is going to pay for that. So depending upon how significant the breach was and how many people were impacted is going to determine how big that cost is going to be. And on top of that, that's just the real dollar cost. There's also damage to your reputation. I mean, if you've been breached, and we see this stuff in the news all the time, such and such company was breached and 500 million customers' data has been compromised. Well, what does that do to your reputation? These giant behemoth companies can probably sustain that, but a small to mid-sized company that has something like that, that can bring the business down. So you want to make sure that you've got the proper policies, procedures, and compliance in place so that you never have to deal with that. And on top of that, it just increases your operational efficiency when you, again, as Sarah mentioned, you get rid of all those tasks that can be automated and integrated so that you don't have to physically have to do them anymore. It just makes things run much more efficiently. Again, the cost of the remediation is going to depend upon how many people were breached, the severity of the breach, number of customers affected, all that kind of stuff is going to weigh into how much it's going to cost to fix the problem. And to avoid that, we talked about all the stuff earlier. Make sure that you've got proper systems in place and a processor that takes care of a lot of that for you so that's something that you don't have to worry about, which actually significantly reduces your PCI scope.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a nice carrot to be PCI compliant, but a really big scary stick if you're not. So something to
True
keep in
enough.
mind.
Yes.
So how can you help? How do cloud-based systems like PayFabric help to keep company data secure?
Yeah, I mentioned it just a moment ago. So the burden of compliance will fall to the processor, right? Our company is a division of Global Payments, who is a global payments provider, as the name might imply, probably one of the largest in the world. So it's our business to make sure that the card data that we maintain on behalf of our merchants and their customers is secure. We meet all the security standards that are required and even going above and beyond that. So working with the proper processor, what they do is significantly reduce your PCI scope. You may only have to do an annual survey that says, what are your procedures? What are your protocols? How do you do it? You don't have to prove vulnerability and all that stuff because, in fact, you never actually possess any cardholder data. All you ever get is an encrypted code for that credit card, and that's what you're allowed to have to stay on the right side of PCI compliance. So it's important that your systems never handle that credit card data, and that your processor handles that on your behalf and only passes you the information that is necessary to process that transaction. So again, significantly reduces your PCI scope, puts the burden on us as the processor to make sure that all the standards are met.
So when it comes to selecting a solution, how does automating the accounts receivable process with Payba- PayFabric, protect consumer data?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I spoke about earlier about the integrate and automate. So our payment processing product is called PayFabric, and we also have a customer portal that's a customer-facing side of things. So this works on two sides of the fence. You've got the customer-facing side and you've got the merchant-facing side, which is an embedded payment processing application within your Sage system. That can be Sage Intacct, Sage 300. We have a solution for both and other ERPs as well, but those are the two we're speaking about today. So from the customer portal standpoint, this that takes care of things like invoice presentment and allows them the ability to select their invoices that they want to pay online through a credit card or an EFT transaction. So that means the customer is entering the data. You're not ever touching it. It's done so through our payment processing screen. And then that transaction is automatically settled within Sage after they've done that transaction. So that's the automate part. So The integration means that we are sending that data automatically into Sage. It gets settled against the invoice, the customer, the bank, all that stuff is automatic. You never actually ever touch that card data because the customer entered it. Now, in a situation where it's an embedded processor within the ERP, let's say Sage Intacct, for instance, our screens pop up to allow you to use that credit card information. So if the customer has chosen to store a credit card with you, it's only the encrypted card data that you have, never the full card information. You're allowed to have that, and you can process a customer invoice directly from within Sage Intacct and have it settle automatically and have that payment flow directly to your bank. So that's the integrate and automate part of things I was talking about earlier. So as much of the human error element as you can take out of it is great. And then also the integration part of things, which automates all that settlement and all that stuff. So it really reduces the amount of work that you have to do to accept a customer payment. In the case of the customer portal side of things, there's really nothing you had to do. They just entered all the information automatically settled. If you're doing it from within the ERP, you're just running the transaction directly from there and it settles automatically within the ERP. So it's done. So it's probably, in the customer portal case, you've reduced that time down to nothing. In the case of you processing it inside of Sage Intacct, let's say, you probably cut that to a quarter of the time or less that it would have taken you to process that transaction manually.
That sounds wonderful. So I think in terms of the next step is to give us a walkthrough of the product. How does that
Sure.
sound?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick look at what the two sides look like, and I'll kind of use Sage Intacct as my example. So I didn't mention this earlier, and I probably should have. So one way that you can deal with this is through a pay link, or we call it click to pay. It's called a pay link. It really depends on who you're working with. But so in our case, you can embed a link right on your invoice document as it leaves Sage, so it goes out to your customer. And the link looks something like what you see on the screen here, right? In our case, we're looking at the North 49 customer portal here. I've clearly mocked up an invoice inside a Word document, but it could be very similar to this. So you'll see that we're steering it to a URL that would be the domain for your customer portal. So that's going to be a subdomain of your current domain. So it's going to be, portal.mydomain.com, whatever your domain happens to be. Then we feed it the AR account number as well as the invoice document number. And from that, so what happens is we've now fed that into our customer portal screen here, and we went into Sage Live to make sure that this was in fact an invoice for that customer and it's still open to pay and how much is left open to pay. So we fed this and this. Once we verified it was all correct, then we added all this extra information in here. This is an editable field right now. That's an option. You turn that on or off. You can either accept partial payments or not. That's entirely up to you. From a customer standpoint, I say I want to pay that. Again, I click that pay invoice button. This is when our pay fabric screen opens up and allows the customer to enter their credit card details. And hit that pay button. So what happens now is, so that was Pay Fabric. That was no longer in the portal itself. That's the secure payment processing software. So what we did was we took that information as the customer entered it, we sent it through the payment processor, and we brought back a post back, presented on the screen the receipt for that customer that they made that payment. There's an option as well within our portal that you can send an email to that customer as well with all the same information. There's also an option for you to get internal notifications that that transaction happened, and you can do that by email, by Microsoft Teams, or by Slack. So you just have that channel or that team set up or a distribution list. Whoever's on that list is going to get this notification. That's particularly handy if you happen to be doing a collection process with a company. You want to know the instant that they pay, this is going to do it. And at the same time, that transaction in Sage Intacct is settled automatically against that invoice, the customer, and the bank. In Sage 300, it goes into an AR receipt batch. So when you post that batch, that transaction is complete. So there was really nothing you had to do to finish that transaction, except in Sage 300, you had to post the batch. And you can see from here, I can print this receipt if I want to, but again, you can email them that same receipt. So that's the click to pay part of things, which really streamlines things a lot for customers. And we do have folks that use our solution just for that, but there's also a full portal in behind that click to pay thing, should you choose to deploy it. Now, we do have both English and French support, and for the French side, we'll change anything that we're in control of. Of course, some of this is going to be controlled by you. For instance, this part is yours to control. That's an image file, your logo, messaging, whatever you want to be there. This is yours to control. It's your welcome message to your customers. And this is for yours to control. That's your address, website, whatever you want to put there. Customers can register themselves here with this self-registration screen, or if you want to control that yourself, you can do that, which means that you'll go into the admin side of the portal, create a user, send them their credentials, so on and so forth. There is an option at this point. If we ask them we'll call it a skill testing question, it's one of 5 different questions about the AR account. And if they answer it correctly, you have the option to give them immediate access to that portal to start doing things, start paying their bills or doing what have you. But once they have their credentials, they can log in and they can see whatever you basically set up on your portal for them to see. So first thing that might happen, again, these are options, use them or not, up to you. This is the one-on-one communication between me as the merchant and this particular customer. And we maintain that. Now, where is my intact? Right inside here, inside the company accounts receivable record under the customer. And this is Bedrock. There they are. So what we did inside of Intact is we added a new tab called Customer Notes. And here's the note that just popped up for that customer inside the portal. And let me move this guy into here so we're on the same side. So that's what this is. So when I click OK on this, you'll see inside of Intact, let me just refresh the screen here. We actually changed that. We added this line up on top here that tells us it's been read. So anything that's below that line, we're not going to display. If you added more comments above that line, we're going to pop them up just like we did here. This one's a little different. This is the broadcast message, and it is controlled within the portal itself, and it goes to every customer. So it's typically something like office hours, policy changes, whatever you need everybody to know about. But when we click OK, it's going to go away. It's not going to keep popping up to annoy them. So there's a whole bunch of different options available here. What you decide to subscribe to will determine which of these icons is available, and there's 3 levels. There's the standard portal, which is the baseline you have to have. It includes the account activity, view transactions, view orders, and the contact us. Optionally, you can do your online payments, which is going to include these 3 icons. And we even have a quick order entry form to allow folks to place orders that will end up automatically inside of Sage for fulfillment or on hold, whatever status you want them to come in on. So I'm not going to talk about all of these things. I'll just touch on a few of them. So number 1, inside of Intact, there's 4 different document types. I think Sage 300 has about 8 that can be displayed here. But again, you can turn these on and off. You don't have to show them all. Just show the ones that you're interested in having your customers see. But they can also filter these down to just the ones they want to see. And if they want to do a reprint or just view that invoice document, they can do so. We're going to present this on-screen version of it. They can hit that print button. They can print that document out for themselves. So if you get customers that say, oh, I've lost my invoice, or I didn't get my invoice, can you resend it? You just direct them here and they can do it for themselves. Once they learn that, you don't get those phone calls anymore. So again, any of these transaction types are available for you if you want to display them. Biggest reason folks get the portal is so people can pay them online 24/7. You don't have to be in the office to accept that payment. You can select multiple documents to pay. You can multi-select the documents you want to pay. Again, turn this bit on and off. This shows you that they have the ability to store those encrypted card tokens. And if I want to use that and make that payment, next thing I'm going to see is the receipt. If I want to use a new card just as a one-time use, I'll just do that, and it's going to pop up that payment screen again. If I want to choose to store that card, it's going to tokenize it, and you're going to be able to see that within Sage Intact or Sage 300 as well, so that you can use it internally as well. So the process is the same as I just kind of showed you through the click to pay functionality. So I'm not going to go through that again, just in the interest of time. There is an option to accept an advance payment within Sage Intact. This is just funds that you're going to hold on account for that customer, and you're going to apply them to something in the future. Sage 300, it's called an unallocated cash payment. You can do that, but also in Sage 300, you can take a prepayment on an order or a prepayment on a quote as well. The managed credit cards, this really just exposes to them which cards they've decided to store and to use in the future. I'm not going to go into the view order side of things right now, but we do show them all of the orders and their statuses in both products. And there is this quick order entry that allows them to place orders directly into Sage 300 or Sage Intacct. We're talking primarily today about the payments and the security there. So if anybody's interested in seeing this a little bit later, just let Sarah know and she'll arrange for another discussion, and we'll talk about those in a bit more detail. So that's all the customer facing side. There is an admin side. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to dive into that and show you. What I do want to show you is a bit more of what we look like inside of Sage Intacct. And it's going to be very similar in Sage 300 as well. But so just try and stretch the imagination a little and you can understand. But the similarities are going to be there. Most of the setup stuff you don't have to worry about. Our team is going to worry about that for you, get it all set up and working. Something you might be interested in, of course, is the the wallet, which is where you will see all the stored card tokens in here for that customer. So we've got an ACH one in here there's a US customer, so they can do ACH. We've got a Visa, we've got a MasterCard. We've selected which ones are the default. If I want to add a card in here, you can certainly do that. And you would enter those card information just kind of like we did when we did that payment, similar to what the customer did. So that's the excuse me, that's the wallet side of things. We exist in a few different screens inside of Sage Intacct. So number one, we exist in the accounts receivable screen under invoices. So let me just find an invoice here that's not paid. Here's partially paid one. Let's use that guy. So you notice we have our Pay Fabric button that pops up here and allows me to take an authorization or do a sale transaction. Now, if we had a pre-authorization on this particular invoice, I could capture that pre-authorization here. And there's a ribbon down here that tells us what's on that particular transaction, whether we have an authorized amount or we've already captured some funds on that particular document. So that's in the accounts receivable invoices. We also exist in the receive payment side of things. And here we will just do it by entering the customer. This is typical Sage Intacct stuff. And I want to take a $10 payment. I can actually show the invoices I want to pay against, but you notice now the Pay Fabric button is lit up and I can do that sale transaction against that receivable that I have in my system. And we also live inside of order entry. So we live, did that wake up? Order entry, sales order. There we go. Yes, I want to leave. Let me find a sale. I think, was this one? I think that was one that was okay. Let's see. Yeah. So here we've got a sales order, and here I can take an authorization or I can do a sale transaction. Now, just a little explanation if you're not familiar with the jargon. An authorization is you basically telling a credit card company, I'm going to process this transaction. I want you to reserve the money for me so that when I ship it, I can capture those funds. That's what the capture is. So the way the card brands want you to do these types of transactions is take the order, authorize the funds, but don't actually take the money until you ship the goods. That's how they like you to do it. Some people, maybe it's a custom environment where I don't do anything until I've been paid. You're going to do the sale transaction, which is the authorization and the capture all in one step. So you have those options here. And it's going to depend on how your process works. You will, employ whichever makes the most sense for you. So we have it in there, and we also have it in the sales invoice. There we go. So same kind of thing applies here. Now, which was the one? Where's the Bedrock guy? You get the point, right? Inside of the sales invoice is going to pop up again. I just need to find one that's got a... Yeah, so there we go. So now the same applies here. If there's something that you can do with Pay Fabric in that transaction, that icon or that button is going to pop up, allowing you to do that. So that's what it looks like embedded inside the system for you, so that you can process customer payments within Sage Intacct and have it automatically settle again against those transactions in the bank and everything else. So that's the sort of quick and dirty look at what Pay Fabric looks like and what the customer portal looks like as well. So again, customer facing side of things where they're doing all the work for you, or the embedded side of things inside Sage Intacct where you're actually processing those transactions on behalf of that customer right within the ERP. So Sarah, I think that does it for the presentation side of things.
Thank you, Peter. So, just as a recap for everyone, we went through what it means to be PCI compliant and some of the common practices that may not be so compliant, and just in terms of the associated risks of what can happen with data integrity, and also to how can it be mitigated, some of the potential costs if companies choose to stay non-compliant, and just how a cloud-based solution like PayFabric can help protect consumer data. So while we wait for any questions to come through the chat, I do have one question for you, Peter. Is what is it you're going to look forward to in 2025? Something positive.
Well, we have a planned family trip to Mexico coming up in spring break, so I'm looking forward to that one. So escape the
That's
Canadian winter and get some sun and fun.
That's amazing. I think with everything that's going on, where sometimes it's nice just to have that bit of hope, right? So in terms of we're almost through winter, as I keep telling
Yes,
myself.
yes. We've had
That's
it pretty
awesome.
easy here in Vancouver, but we're going to get some snow this weekend, I'm told. So be our first.
Better warm, bundle up. So that's not a
Yes.
problem. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming through the chat. I do want to thank everyone for coming online this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. This webinar is being recorded, so we will be able to share it out in the near future, pardon me. If you have any questions or if you have any recommendations on what you would like to see in future webinars, please let us know. We're always happy to take some feedback. Without further ado, again, thank you, Peter, for coming online today. It was a pleasure hosting you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.